Everybody. Welcome to the Inkwell Exchange. I'm so happy that you could join us. I am just adding in our guest, and he will be here shortly. And for people who are new here, the Inkwell Exchange are these little conversations that Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. You can hear me and see me okay?
I can hear you and see you. It's so great to see you. So great for you to join us.
My great pleasure.
Perfect. Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? I was just telling people that this is the Inkwell Exchange, and we have our author on today, Wayne-Daniel. So I'm so happy to have him introduce himself. Tell us a little bit about your background in writing, and then we'll go from there.
Well, thank you. My name is Wayne-Daniel Berard, the man with a hyphenated first name. Wayne-Daniel is my first name. Half Jewish, half Gentile. Everybody got something, and I got two names. And they all spoke to each other afterwards, so that's okay. I am a retired professor and a writer. I have 12 books to my credit so far, and my hybrid memoir is coming out in the fall for number 13, so I'm excited about that. And I think I'm here particularly because of my my writing of Harry Potter-themed poetry, which is very exciting. I should more say poetry informed by the Potterverse. You know, it takes it and uses the Harry Potter images to speak about regular life in poetry in the same way as once, you know, there was a time, you know, I'm 71 years old now, so I should forewarn you, where, you know, you, as a writer, you could guess that pretty much everybody would know their Greek myths. Everybody knew their Bible stories. This was a common symbolic language that writers had used for generations and generations. You know, a little creative shorthand they put forward. Not so much anymore. People don't know these things as much as they used to. So, you know, if I were to say to you, he's as rich as Croesus, you know, people would say, Jesus, what? Who, what? You know, but if I were to say, well, you know, he really is more like he who must not be named. Everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah. If I said to you, your boyfriend or girlfriend's a Dementor, you'd know what I meant. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas if I said, you know, Desdemona and Othello, be careful of this person, you go, I don't know, who the hell's that? You know, so, oh, you might. So,
right.
So it's, you know, I think that the mythology of Harry Potter has kind of filled in that void of mythic literature that's been left behind. And, you know, myth is like nature. It abhors a vacuum. So some mythos is going to come in there. It always does. And I think that's a much better one to come in than some of the myths that we've seen pervading, like supremacy,
right,
you know,
right.
neo-fascism, nationalism, you know, with its own mythos, that it can also just fill in these gaps. And we don't want that. At least I don't want that. So I think the Harry Potter mythos is much better suited. After all, you know, the people who insist on purity of blood lose in Harry Potter, right? So all well and good. And I think there's a whole beautiful universe that we can use to illumine our own universe. Just like that's what myth does, right? It helps explain ourselves and to each other.
I love that. I think that really dives into why you picked Harry Potter, because I always say, like, Harry Potter was my gateway book.
Yes.
Right? Like, people have gateway drugs. Harry Potter was my gateway book. I read, I think, the whole series in like 2 weeks.
Yes.
Wow. I think there were only 6 books then, but I went pretty fast. And after that, I don't think I've stopped reading since.
Yes.
So I think I completely agree. And then I also think, as far as where it sits in our, like, I guess say social conscience, right? It's everybody has kind of those touch points. Most people know their house. Most people know what characteristics belong with each house.
Yes.
And so it's kind of easy to pull those in to a poem. But my kind of question is, for you in particular, why did you decide a whole book of Potterverse-inspired poetry?
Well, it's interesting. I found myself, you know, writing one poem, then another poem that talked about real life in Harry Potter terms, that would talk about good and evil and love, and rejection and finding love. And, there's Harry Potter who's the orphan who doesn't know who he was. I was an orphan myself who didn't, and I had to I found my birth family as an adult. Very interesting story,
Yeah.
and had to, and I think for a lot of people, especially I want to say the generations kind of below me, I think sometimes there's a real feeling of abandonment. You tell me, that, my God,
I agree.
What the hell did they leave us with?
Right. I agree. I think there is a real feeling of, I think there's just also a feeling of searching, right? I think that's very common in our popular culture, in our writings, and our TV shows.
Yep.
There's always somebody trying to figure out who they are. And usually the reveal is either their special power or their background or their past.
Right. Yeah, you're a wizard, Ellisa, right? There we go. It's something.
It would be great, right? I'm still waiting on my letter.
But that's fine, okay. But that's what I think. There's a whole feeling of lostness that can happen, and people feeling overwhelmed by everything, and not always particularly treated with respect by the generation before them, unfortunately. So, by their parents and their families. So, along comes Hagrid, who says, no, you're special. There's nothing wrong with you. You're special. And come, I'm going to show you. We're just underneath the surface, just around the corner. There's all this magic, all this specialness. But the nice thing about it is it's very real. In other words, you don't go into Hogwarts and all your problems are solved. There's all this bitterness and nastiness and spite and competition, as in the Muggle world.
Yeah.
And so he still has to. It's real.
Right.
That's the thing. I think a fantasy world has to be real, and in its own terms. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think.
No, I completely agree. I think there's definitely a reason Hagrid is a lot of people's favorite character.
Oh yes.
But I think part of it is the fact that he is the one who brings that message, and usually he is also the person who illuminates, or you go to when you're in a tough spot, or you need that help.
Exactly right.
So I think that's really what resonates with people from that universe. And so then also, so you strung these poems together.
Yeah.
How was your writing process with that? I think we always have a lot of writers that tune in, and I think one of the questions they have is like, how do you stay motivated writing, period? Because you've already told us you have 13 works.
I have to say, in some ways, I'm not sure if I'm the best person to ask that, because, when I was teaching, they would say, well, you write, but you have novels, you have short stories, you have teach the creative writing course. And I would say, how often can you say, do your meditation, go to the page, open it up, and go? Don't think about it, just let it come out, whatever way it comes out. And it's hard to do 13 weeks on that. So, but for me, it's never an issue. I don't work to, compassionate non-attachment to outcome, effortless effort. Breathe it in and breathe it out, and you let it, and you don't worry about it. You let it go whatever way it goes, and you let the story or the poem tell itself through you. I'm not someone who's ever struggled. But if it's not coming, then it's not supposed to come. Okay, I'll go on, come back to something the next day. That's how I am. So I think I'm kind of atypical in that way. It's a joy, and it just flows. I wake up every morning and there's a new poem in my head.
Yeah. I think I agree. I think there's a piece of that also comes with just kind of an acceptance of whatever flows out of your pen. I think there's a lot of judgment that comes with, especially when you're a newer writer or you're starting to try and take on writing professionally, that comes with, you're not mad about the fact that writing is coming, you just don't feel like what you've written is good enough, right? Or that it's right. And there's no right answer to writing.
That's not. The universe is finding its expression through you, if it didn't want to, it wouldn't send you anything. So if whatever you write is right, pardon the pun, right? And if you think of some of the writers that we all love, that's exactly how they have. So don't worry about that. Don't worry. Compassionate non-attachment to outcome. It's not about the outcome. It's about the experience of doing the writing. Do you find joy as you do it? Is it fun for you? Or even better, do you wake up at one point and say, "Oh God, I've been writing for 2 hours. What the hell did I write?" Sometimes it's like I'm in a trance. It's like what? It's like automatic writing. What was that? I go back and read it and say, "Oh, gee, that's kind of fun."
Yeah.
I would enjoy reading that. That's the thing. Enjoy the ride. Don't worry about where you're going.
Right.
The universe knows what it's doing. Just open channel D and go.
I love that. I love that. So so outside of Harry Potter, poetry, what other forms of writing have you taken on and that you found that you enjoy?
Oh my word, almost all of them. Everything but I haven't written a play yet. I'm thinking of working on a verse play later on this year. I'm toying with this idea.
Yeah.
But I have a mystery novel that is out there called Noah and the Bark, not Noah and the Ark, Noah and the Bark, where the president of a college is murdered and the faculty and staff are trying to figure out who did this thing, right? But only her little dachshund knows because it witnessed it. So how do you try to figure this one out? It's a lot of fun. I have books of short stories. I have novellas. Okay, I have a novella called Everything We Want, EWW, where it comes at a time in the future where we're just about to have economic collapse. Sound familiar? And so the president takes it upon himself, take executive powers, and creates a new economic order. EWW, Everything We Want. If you work 40 hours a week, if a full-time job, you get a little blue card that says EWW. As long as you're working, with that you can get as much as you want, all the time, anytime you want it. So, of course, the factories are just going along, and it eliminates money from the equation. However, some people can't really get the card. If you're an artist, if you're a street performer, if you're how can you do this? If you're a writer, how do you do this? So they're kind of off the grid in this way. And well, there are murders going on in this universe.
Yeah.
And of course, people are blaming the outcasts, and I don't want to give it away, but there you go. So
right.
I write all sorts of differing forms and have a wonderful time doing them all.
That's amazing. And I see the range. How do you, and I guess this is another kind of process question, but specific to you, how do you write them all at once? Or do you have like pieces of stories floating around and eventually when you feel like you have enough on a particular subject, you just collapse it into a book?
Usually when I'm writing prose, whether it's short story or a longer fiction novel, I'm working on that. I really can't find myself working on another one at the same time. It doesn't seem to work. Right? However, I can write poetry and write prose at the same time. For some reason, the poem will come on its own. Yeah. But I find that if I'm immersed in this universe, in a novel or short story, I can't go and do another one. No. But poetry seems to be it's almost like the difference between music, right, and literature. You could. A lot of people can listen to music and write. They can do that.
Right. No, that's really interesting. So, for instance, I always like to give my own personal examples for people who are watching. I write a lot of poems, a lot. And if you've been with us a minute, in these series, you'll know, I have yet to publish my poetry book because I cannot seem to let it go. No pun intended. But I also write a bunch of short stories. And so my thought process is that it'll end up being a short story and poetry book somehow in a collection. But I also struggle with long form. I don't know why. I've always just been better at shorter compositions that I can see the end of.
Sure.
Long form stories need dialogue. I just feel like it gets messy.
Yep.
And so I find it really interesting when we find gems like you who can do all of it kind of and feel comfortable bouncing around with all of it. What was your first long form, either novel or piece? And then how was that? Was the first time a struggle, and then it was easier after that?
Well, I know I'm going to sound terrible, but it's never been a struggle for me. Thank God. You know,
I love that.
it's strange. I know, but my first novel that I wrote a couple of novellas, but the first real novel I wrote, and it's still out there. It's an ebook form, right? And it's called The Retreatants. That is, people who are on retreat, or on religious retreat. So going back a little bit, I've always been a very spiritually oriented person, right? To the point where, as I said, I'm an old man now, but at 14 years old, I went off to the seminary to study to be with the Franciscans. Long brown robe and a rope and a hood. I look like a salt shaker, basically. You get the idea, right? Now, of course, this is interesting because I find out when I'm an adoptee. I was an adopted kid. So when I went to search out my birth family, I found that I'm Jewish, which is really intriguing.
Yeah.
So I've been this Jewish seminarian. It's really interesting, but I didn't know it back then. So as I went on my spiritual search, I started to see all the things I didn't know. You know, here I had been a seminarian devoted to Jesus, supposedly, who was Jewish, and I knew nothing about the Jewish Jesus. You know what I mean?
Right.
This was who he was. He wasn't the blonde, blue-eyed guy that looked like the mighty Thor in my stained glass window as a boy, of my church. Right. So when I started to do that, I ended up taking my own process of becoming, okay, and turning it into a novel. That's what I do with a lot of it's my own thing. So the Retreatants centers around these group of people who are on religious retreat, and the theme is that they all feel like they've lost God in their lives. Now they're Christians. For them, God is Jesus. So they end up in this retreat. It's a silent retreat, except they can talk off and on. And the leader is this big, burly Jewish guy who's going to talk about the Jewish Jesus and talk about a God that is bigger than anybody's religion, and kind of blow their ideas of God apart and help them to reassemble it. So that was how that went. So I was really, taking my own spiritual struggles and turning them into so here's a struggle, a piece of the struggle I had. We'll make him a character. Here's a piece of the struggle I had. We'll make her a character. Do you see what I mean? And the main character, the retreat master, whose name was Abramovich, was nobody I knew, just somebody I wish the hell I'd known, and had been able to guide me when I was going through this process. There was nothing like it in those days. So I think a lot of it is taking your own journey, your own life, and turning it into art. That's what
I love that.
I
love that. I think particularly that spiritual piece. So we will have towards the end of the month, I'll be releasing a taped interview I'm doing with two authors that are very spiritually based in their works, but I also have a lot of I would say God is an easy thing to write about. Yeah. Because I said you always feel some kind of way about him, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And I think also as far as reading and books that have inspired me in that space, I love Mitch Albom, yes, wonderful. He's amazing. The way he can pull together not only a world but a story to make you ask questions without necessarily giving you answers. Yes, I think is amazing. I think that's amazing, and I really loved. And I think that what made me think of that was how you were talking about that, bringing in your real life experience. And I think real life experience sometimes can be so uncertain. I guess kind of closing the loop on the first part of our conversation, yes, which is there is this lostness, there is this searchingness that has to come with it, which means your books don't, or your writings don't have to have an answer. No. That's also why I've always leaned into short form poetry, because I felt a little better about taking people's time and then leaving them with nothing but questions.
Well, that's real life.
But that's real life. And I think you're completely right to say that there is definitely a place for that in long form novels as well. Mm-hmm. So then, as far as novellas, have you ever written? Have you ever been tempted even to dive into other universes outside of the Potterverse?
Other mythic universes?
Yeah, other mythic universes.
No, not so much. No, not really. I've created things, but have not created any new universes. And I should really think about that. That's a good idea. But I did do back in the 1980s. This is how old I am. Okay, back in the 1980s, I was in grad school, right? And I wrote a novella, okay, about people who were this fellow who was driving to work every day back and forth in the traffic, the terrible traffic on the highway, and looking next to him, there's this beautiful open green median strip, you know what I mean? And I'm in New England, beautiful stones and flowers and little bridges, and finally he had a reality shift. And he said, why am I on this awful, noisy, congested asphalt part, and I'm not on the beautiful green part? Yeah. So he chucks everything and goes to live on the median strip.
Wow.
I'm just going there. I'm just going to wander. And people see him. The newspapers come. His best friend hears about it, shows up. Before you know it, it's a whole new hippie movement of people giving up their world and going off and living in the median strip with their livestock. And it's called Fall of the Meads. And so it was just this, and of course the straight world's going crazy over this.
Right.
So
right.
It's just, so I create alternative universes, but nothing mythic. No, haven't done that. But
yeah, no, I've never been. I think you should give it a try. I think probably one of the writing prompts. So we also have a writing group on Facebook. If anybody wants to join, we have a kind of nurturing writing community, and I share people with writing prompts all the time. And the one I'm prepping for this week, I think, is going to be purely just like create a world. What would it be like? What would the sky look like? What would the grass look like? What would the air smell like? Because I am so amazed by people who can build out those universes and allow our brains the space to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think the Potterverse that you wrote about or used in your work is a good example, right? Because you can write your works and reference those works, and they probably look very different in other people's minds. Like until the movies, Dementors look very different in my mind.
Yes, right.
But so they make the same thing.
Here's my question to you. What universe do you live in the inside? What universe is running underneath all the time? Where do you go when you want to escape, or even just going in? We always have this place running underneath in some way, don't we? And
yeah.
So I'd like to know what that is for you.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think mine would probably be really close to like a Greek mythic world. Honestly, not super unique. But because I took Greek mythology, and I also took Egyptian mythology, almost not only a lot of my writing works, but just a lot of my references and conversation and things will reference like some combination of this world where there are like in particular, like I love like muses and that kind of sunshine versus that real, and I think as humans we gravitate to those real clear definitions of good and evil.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
so like the sunshine of Persephone versus the down low underworld of Hades, which I find fascinating. That I found fascinating when I got to college, that like Hades wasn't all that bad.
Right, of course.
Right, it was very neutral. It was just death, basically.
Right.
And so could be good or bad, and also represented wealth, which was all very weird, but also very cool to me And so if I had to like create a whole new world, I think it would be that. And I will say in my book, Meet Cairo, it's not mythic, but I think similar to how you were talking about how your experiences inform your life, I created Meet Cairo in a parallel universe that had like red trees and golden bushes, because I wanted it to be a space where a little black girl and her little brown dog could run around unencumbered without parents and feel safe. And like the real world to me didn't fit that. Right. So I had to create a separate space, even though I wanted it to be recognizable and relatable, because that is somewhat what I want our world to look like eventually. Right. When, you know, Christopher Robin or any of those other little boys or girls in mainstream stories are running around without their parents, it takes us to where like 16 or 18 to even ask, like, oh my God, where are these kids' parents?
It was a different day.
And like they're gone, have been gone for days, right? And nobody's asked any questions. And I wanted that for a little black girl and her dog. And so it took creating a different space. And even as I build out the rest of Cairo's series, I've had to take that into consideration. Like my next book is probably going to be something about ships and pirates and captains. And sometimes the question I have to ask myself as I'm writing is, how far do I want to take it? Right? Do I want it to be like truly a completely pirate fantasy role, or is it something similar to like our military, just a little less war hawkish? Right? Like there's a very, I think, and writers have to kind of draw that line in the sand somewhere, or you get messy universes that don't end up with cohesion.
I hear that. But I think you trust yourself and let it flow the way it goes. I think that's really important. So I mean, so that's, you know, like I said, where do you live on the inside? You know, most of the time, where do your insides live? You know, that's a, Let me read you something. Can I?
Yes.
Is that all right?
Please.
All right. That illustrates what I'm talking about. I live in Mansfield, Massachusetts, folks. So this is called Joy. They think I'm sitting here on Mansfield Common, but I'm really in the middle courtyard of Hogwarts School. It's nearly May, and the 100 leaves of roses manifest themselves to Muggle eyes as prim, while umbrella flowers float nimbously in the sky. Their outsides show white but kaleidoscope at sunset. Rise. I wear my Gryffindor scarf as I sit on this bench across from the entrance corridor, a.k.a. North Main Street, in direct line with the Duncans, which exists in both worlds. Magic is magic. I want my fellow Potter souls to recognize me. A very McGonagall woman smiles like I look far too happy over here. And the only unleashed dog traces the rune P in the sand with his tail, which stands for joy, by the way. I agree. I'd imagine almost every passerby believes their body has a soul. Why wonder then that mine animates broomsticks that flies me through my days like that gull overhead? All we can see of silver dragon glittering here like star, though truly a swirling ball of fire a universe away. See, that's what,
I love that.
Where do you live on your insides, no matter what's going on around you? When you know, where do your insides live? Write that.
I love that. If you're watching this Inkwell exchange, we're gonna do something on that. We're gonna do something on that writing prompt, because I think that will be create some amazing work. I think that's great.
Thank you.
But I really appreciate you taking the time and joining me. It's been a great conversation. I want to give you a chance to tell people where they can get your work. Please show them the cover of the book so that they know where to get, what they can look for. Because I want to make sure that they can support you. So please go ahead.
Well, this is a chapbook, just a little chapbook, right? My Harry Potter book, Little Ghosts on Castle Floors. Okay, poems informed by the Potterverse. It's from Kelsey Books. You can get it on Amazon. Okay, like everything else in the universe. So there it is. And my My brand new book is also a chapbook, in chapbook phrase. That's called How Air Is. Let's love that cover. It's
Gorgeous.
it's not Harry Potter. It's a non-Harry Potter poems, but that's out there too. Yeah, I did
That's
a friend
gorgeous.
of mine, Hayamala, who's involved with one of the Jewish communities I'm involved with, did this beautiful cover. So she's
Yeah.
just a young kid. So yeah, wonderful artist. Shout out to her. So.
Huge shout out to artists and illustrators everywhere. You make our work and our words be packaged so beautifully. So we thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
My
And I hope
great
you
pleasure. My great pleasure. Thank you.
You have
By the way, I'd love to see your work. Myself and a couple of friends have a literary magazine called Soulit. SOUL-LIT.com. Soulit is for spiritual poetry, which we construe very broadly. So, Ellisa, send us something. Look us up. Soul-lit.com. And everybody out there, send us something.
Yes, will do. And I'll make sure I link it somewhere. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.
Enjoyed it greatly. Thank you.